Hello, Catskill International Film Festival, and welcome to another amazing panel. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to Jamie and Karen Zellemeyer, and they are the creators of the podcast "I Was Never There." So I'm gonna play a little intro trailer to the podcast so you guys can kind of get an idea of what it's about. Definitely check it out. Again, it's called I Was Never There. And here is the trailer you can listen to.
In 1985, Marcia Mudd Ferber took the stage at the Underground Railroad, a bar she owned in Morgantown, West Virginia, to hold an election.
Let's hear it from Ronald Reagan. And now, given the choice, would you vote for Harriet Tubman? All right. Harriet Tubman is president of 123 Pleasant Street, Morgantown, West Virginia.
Marcia was a political radical and a hippie with a flair for the dramatic.
The first time I saw Marcia, she was walking down High Street singing at the top of her lungs, "Let's get drunk and screw."
Everywhere Marcia went, she built community.
She was all about redistribution of wealth. She'd share her panties.
She raised the consciousness of West Virginia.
And then, one day in April 1988, she disappeared.
Marcia was last seen April 25th. All that was missing was her backpack. Her car was left at a parking meter. Belongings left in an apartment above the bar.
I'm Jamie Zellemeyer. I was raised communally by a bunch of hippies who had a lot of fun and did a lot of drugs. That's how I knew Marcia. Growing up, she was like a second mom to me.
And I'm Karen Zellemeyer, Jamie's back-to-the-land hippie mom. Marcia was one of my best friends.
We've decided to go back in time, talking to people from her past and ours to try and figure out what happened.
But the more we spoke to people, the more I realized there was a lot of shit going on that I knew nothing about.
She was possibly murdered by some drug dealer types.
The pot business funded everything.
We were in South America, Marcia and I. We were in trouble.
This podcast is about Marcia Ferber.
But it's also about us.
So I've said this about 1,000,000 times, but what the fuck were you thinking?
I wasn't, but would I do anything differently? I'm almost embarrassed to say probably not.
This is I Was Never There. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
So great. Really, guys, make sure you check it out. It's a great podcast, and I enjoyed every episode. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jamie and Karen Zellemeyer, the co-hosts and creators of I Was Never There. They're a mother and daughter team. Jamie is a producer, studio executive, and former president of NYWIFT. That's how we know each other. And also a parent activist. Karen is an artist, writer, and I love this, professional lesbian who worked on LGBTQ plus issues for decades. Wonder Media Network creates podcasts that amplify underrepresented voices and inspire action. And they're the ones who worked with Jamie and Karen to bring this podcast to life. So my first question is to both of you. I'm sure you can both kind of attest to it. Whose idea was it to come up with this podcast, and why was the story important to tell?
It was Jamie's. 100% Jamie's. One day she came to me and said, "Mom, why don't we do a podcast about Marcia?" And that's where it started. But you, Jamie, you can talk about why we wanted to do it.
Well, we had been trying to figure out for a long time how to tell the story of the time and place, which was West Virginia in the 1970s and 80s, that was really the story that I always wanted to tell in some way. However that was, like through television or film, or I hadn't really thought about audio. And then there were just a few things that happened. I think a producer friend of mine recommended the idea of doing it as a podcast. And then the other thing was that I had listened to another true crime podcast, which is also a great podcast, called The Ballad of Billy Balls, which is part of Crime Town.
Writing that one down. Okay.
Which is about the East Village in the 90s, and also a child kind of telling their parents' story. And when I heard that podcast, I was kind of like, oh, I have these elements, and I have the time and place. And I also, after West Virginia, we lived in the East Village. So I kind of felt connected to that other podcast also in that way. And and so I was like, well, we have this time and place, and we have this other story, Marsha's story. And maybe if we put them together, it will create this true crime or kind of true crime adjacent podcast. And so it's just a lot cheaper to make a podcast than it is to make a film. Not necessarily faster, but less expensive.
I was going to say, that's another question I'm going to come to in a minute.
And so we just felt like it was something we could start on our own, that you didn't need someone to give you a ton of money to do it at the front end of it. And so we just I just started like doing research online, like what equipment to use and what do people use, just.
Yeah. Like, where do you start? What do we do to make a podcast?
Just research. And
Podcasting 101.
There's a lot of articles you can read about equipment and what recorders to get. But really the main thing is that we went to B&H. B&H Photo actually has like a whole audio section. So you can just go there and tell them, I want to spend around this amount of money, and I want to, and this is what we want to do. And they will like kind of give you tips and help you figure it out, because they must get a lot of people that go there to buy audio equipment. And the last thing I'll say is that my mom agreed that she was going to put in a little bit of money towards it. It was just like a few $1,000s. And she was like, I'll invest this money into just helping us get kickstarted, which helped pay for a little travel and the equipment and transcribing and stuff like that. And that's kind of how it started.
So I just saw a question pop up about how did COVID-19 change podcasts? And I believe at the time you started this, it was during COVID, right? No, it wasn't.
Why don't you talk about Mom?
Yeah, so we actually started it. I think we did our first interviews in
December of 2019.
Of 2019. In-person interviews, not a lot, two. I think we had done 2 interviews.
One in December, one in January.
And then the lockdown happened. So obviously it's like, first of all, it was like, now what the hell do we do?
Because we were pretty invested in it and we knew we wanted to do it. So
eventually we did a lot of it for quite some time on Zoom.
Yeah.
And then started driving down to West Virginia with your wipey things and
cleaning everywhere you go. Yeah.
Trying to sit outside. And I'd say the Zooms, when we first started doing Zoom, we did not do them well. Like we like now when we do it for we're working on the second season. Now we have microphones and we connect them to Zoom and we record a backup and a QuickTime backup.
We send the people we're interviewing microphones. So
we did not do that on season 1, which is fine. It gives a texture to the whole new thing. It's just different. And what we're doing now works well for season 2. And what we did for season 1 was more homegrown. And that was okay, but we really did not know what we were doing, and we really learned as we went along.
We were talking about this too before we came on, that during COVID, that was when there was an explosion of podcasts because nobody could really work on set. So everybody was creating podcasts, and I feel like it hasn't really gone down. Like I think it's just getting bigger.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on the full business, but I do think that especially like podcasts of people kind of talking to each other, there was kind of more of an explosion. But it is you can have an idea, and you can, if you go to B&H and you spend a few $100, like you can get. We probably spent $650 initially, maybe a little more, but you can start with not a lot of money to at least just try to get some audio.
Yeah, just get it started.
Yeah.
It's good advice. Karen, This is a very personal story. And sometimes it doesn't show you in the best light.
You think?
So I was wondering, did you ever have second thoughts about jumping into this story and sharing this part of your life?
I didn't, but I had a moment when we were getting closer to the end, and I was actually playing the episodes. They weren't quite finished yet, but I was playing them for my brother and my niece. And my brother at one point listened to episode 6, which is a very personal episode. And he was like, really? Did you really have to say all? I think he felt protective of, did you really need to expose yourself like that?
I think that's what makes it great, though, because it's so honest.
I found it liberating and sometimes embarrassing that there were times where it was like, oh my God, you were really stupid or thoughtless, or, that line between taking risks and being reckless. And I crossed that line a bunch of times. What was really, I think, the hardest to admit is that even in retrospect, I probably would have done the same shit again. So, yeah, but yeah, it was, I don't regret it. I didn't regret it at the time. It was just that one moment when my brother was like, really? Did you have to tell them all that?
And Jamie, did you know like the full story before you started doing this, or were you like learning parts as you went along?
I'd say like maybe 70 to 80% of it. I mean, it was, there was some parts of the bigger story not related to our story that we did not know. So I want people to listen to the podcast, so I'm not going to give it all away, but some of the stuff that comes in episode 5, where we kind of try and figure out what really did happen to Marsha and just look into some of the background stuff. And then some of the stuff in episode 6, that's our episode of our true story. I didn't know all of that, like the hash smuggling in from Jamaica in the sleeping bag, or the end. I knew some of the stuff at the end I knew my mom had done some work related to a friend of ours who was a drug dealer, but I didn't know like that was why, or
he was a marijuana dealer. He wasn't a drug
dealer. Yeah. That
yeah. Maybe we have connections with.
There was just
it was a good friend.
There was one moment in telling this story. We were interviewing a very, very dear friend, someone who was like a co-parent to Jamie and Sarah. And she said, "You remember that story?" And Jamie and I were together, sitting next to each other. And as Patty started telling the story, I couldn't like fully turn my head to.
Because you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming.
I knew it was coming, and it was it was about me using Jamie, right, as my mule, so to speak. And I just kind of looked at her from out of the side of my eye, but it was this cringe moment, and
Jamie probably had her mouth wide open, like, what?
That was a rough moment.
I knew a lot, but not everything. I mean, there's just but now I know everything.
Yep, now you know.
At least you think you know everything.
No, that's going to be the second season. Karen's Secrets. Okay, so for both of you guys, I think you kind of answered it already.
Season 3. Karen's Secrets.
Karen's Secrets. Did you have any prior experience with podcasting before you jumped in? So you guys just jumped in.
I mean, I do have experience in film, so I do have some I understand storytelling. I mean, and development and production also. So I had all of that, but I did not have that in audio. So I had never recorded my own audio. That was very daunting. And I didn't really understand the different types of audio. That's a good question. How do we overcome creative differences?
And we have them.
Yes, we do. I didn't really understand the process. I understood how to like put a story together, but also when you're working with a new team, it takes time too to figure out that process. So there was both the working with new people that I didn't know, and then understanding a different process, which honestly I'm still learning even on season 2, because not everyone has the same process. So I have a good sense now, but I really did not know what I was doing.
I really admire that. I admire you just be like, I'm going to do this, and you just jump in and you just do it. I admire that.
It's like cooking. Like people think I can cook, but it's because I follow recipes. So I follow I go online, I do research, I read, I ask questions, I talk to people I know, and that's kind of like
that's how you learn. That's how you learn.
Blind. But when we started, Jamie was really clear from the beginning that she didn't know how to put a podcast together other than the storytelling piece of it, and that she really wanted to find producers, a company that would do this with us.
That's to me like that's a good creative, like someone who says, I don't know anything about it. Like you're not going in like cocky, like I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Like you're learning, you're asking people, you're learning. That's what you do, right?
Right. And at a certain point, we realized that we needed to.
Yes, I'm a nerd. Stop it.
That's funny.
At a certain point, we realized we needed to do like a teaser or something that we could send out to companies. So that's which are hard. Right. What we have learned is they are really hard to do. The trailers are really hard to do. And then the only other thing I would say about this, when I went into this with Jamie, she said, hey, you want to do this? I thought, oh, this will be a gas. I love the idea of doing something with my kid. And thought my role would be to just sit back, and then Jamie would say, okay, now do this or now do this. And to her credit, she was really, really fabulous about, no, Mom, we're doing this together and you're a partner in this. And then I think sometimes maybe to her regret, I felt empowered to become a partner. And then suddenly it was like, well,
all right, you can step back a little bit, Mom. It's okay.
Right, but I really went into it thinking this is going to just be a joyride with my kid.
Aww.
and I did become fully invested in the process.
We did do a teaser, so just if anyone's like that, what you played was the trailer, which was created after the show was completed, and Wonder Media Network created the trailer. But before we connected with Wonder Media Network, that's actually a pandemic thing. We recorded some audio, and then a company that I had worked with called Cutters, which is a commercial company, they were kind of shut down during the pandemic, and they wanted to do some creative work. And I had worked with them on something else, like a feature film that they were part of. And someone who worked there said, well, can we help you with this? Just to do, no string, and it was no strings attached. And they had wonderful, amazing editors, and they put together this 4-minute teaser, which was quite good. And we were able to sell it from that teaser, but that we did on our own before. I do think with audio, it's like important to have some audio to, at least that's been our experience, is that it's helpful to have some audio to help sell it. Unlike like a film, you don't have the script, you don't have, the lookbook is different in this case because it's audio. So we sold it based on audio.
What's the question about, is the audio limiting? Did we find the audio?
That question, right?
Yeah, that question right there. I think, Jamie, you should talk to that one, because I think Jamie found it actually liberating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, with audio, I think there are many things. I mean, it's fun to tell a story without the audio, without the visuals. It's because you have to tell it in a different way that's more visually, like you have to tell us the story in a way that's visual, and that's an interesting challenge. There's also different rules and regulations. Like in film, I would never use a song without a clearance license. And in audio, if you mention a song first, then you can play it. Like there's different fair use things. So there's a little more freedom in audio, at least right now. And so I appreciated that part of it. But I think storytelling is still challenging no matter what it is, but it is a little easier without the visuals. And also I think it's a little less harsh. Like I feel like when you're on camera, it affects people differently. Like watching it has a different effect. When you're listening to it, it's not, there's like I don't know, there's just a layer missing that's not there. And so I would feel like I tell people like it doesn't come off in the same way as video does. I can't quite explain it. I'm sure there's somebody who is more articulate in that, understanding that connection or disconnection because there's no visuals and how it kind of plays in our heads and how we sit with it afterwards. But I feel it's a little bit different with audio.
Well, and we talked a lot about the fact that so much of the existing films about that period, that kind of hippie, back to the land kind of time period, it's very cliche, that what you see is kind of very cliched. And so it gave us the opportunity to tell a story that is not.
Right, because we
can create its own palette and kind of break free from that.
Yeah, it was like we weren't telling people like what they were wearing, or the only person you really know what they look like is Marcia, just from us telling you like she's short and she has a fro and whatever, like, but you have to kind of imagine what everyone looks like. I mean, we give enough, but not so much. And I think that's a fun part of audio, that there's a little more freedom there on both sides.
For the imagination.
Yeah.
So this is and this might a text I saw Alexis saying what's the most important part, and I was looking through all of the reviews and I noticed that Stephen King wrote a review on your podcast, and I was wondering.
Well, he tweeted about it.
Did he tweet about it? I was reading through it.
He tweeted about it. It was very kind of him. I don't know him personally, but it was shocking. It was extremely surprising.
And it got like 500,000 hits.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That was great. And but it got me thinking about the writing it takes to make a podcast, and how important would that be? Is that really the most important when you're making a podcast? Or, I mean, what do you think?
Well, it's all scripted. I mean, it's scripted. It's, you record the audio. Like right now we're working on season 2, which we can talk about at the end, but it's the same host, a different story. But we are doing, we are doing all the interviews now up front. But the next phase would be the writing process, where one of our producers, whoever is assigned to a particular episode, writes the script. They pull sections of the interviews, it's called tape. They pull tape and they put it in with our narration, and they write around it narration. And then we get the script, and then we kind of tweak it to sound more like us. And then we do a table read, and then it gets tweaked again and then you record it, and then usually you'll go in a couple times just to fix things or tweak things. So it goes through a pretty lengthy rewrite process
to get it written. Because I did notice the writing in the podcast was great, because it's like, it really is almost like you're reading a book. It's like, and everything's very descriptive and, explains it. But then you also had like the interviews kind of entangled in it. So it was just very interesting how it was put together.
Yeah. And that each episode has a producer who podcast language is different in their credits, but the producer puts the script together, and then often puts the episode to, pulls the audio together and puts the music and everything. And we work very collaboratively with that person. Sometimes that person, like in season one person did 4 episodes. Someone did 2 episodes. You can do multiple episodes, but it's very scripted. And even sometimes we do tape exchange, which is the 2 of us talking, is in the episodes. And sometimes that's us. It's audio that we've captured before we even started putting the episodes together. But sometimes even that is like a little bit thought out in terms of
what are you going to talk about?
Yeah, like it's our story, and it's something that we can talk and should talk about. But it is, but sometimes when an episode's put together, we'll see like, oh, that would be a good place for tape exchange and about whatever the episode is about. So it's very scripted and structured. And because you really have to, I've been sort of peeking at some of the questions, but you have to really build character in these show, this podcast is 8 episodes plus there's a bonus episode, but just like a film or television show, like you have to build character with your interviewees, but also characters with your we are characters also in our own show, and you have to be willing to go along for that ride with all of those characters, and know when to bring them in and out, and how many to have within each episode. You don't really want to have in this type of like serialized nonfiction, like it's hard to have too many in one episode because it will be confusing to remember who they all are. So we kind of usually landed on 2 to 4 people, give or take, main speakers plus ourselves. So you really have to think about character and structure and story when you're doing multiple episodes. And the first episode and the last episode are really usually the hardest. And for us, the first episode, we probably did like 3 or 4 times, and really kind of finished it last at the end, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, really, really is a lot. So Karen, oh, hold on. Oh yeah, I was just going to say that. I was just going to ask this actually.
You learned about yourself.
So what did you hope to gain from this project? Like when Jamie came up with it, what were you hoping you would gain? You kind of answered it where you're like, you can hang out with your daughter and have a good time. What were you, is that the one thing you were hoping you would gain from it?
Oh, well, I was hoping it would be fun to do. I was hoping we would solve this mystery.
I think you reconnected with old friends.
Yeah, that was a real bonus from it that I don't think either one of us realized going into it how absolutely wonderful it was going to be, because we knew most of the people, not all of them, but we knew a lot of the people we wanted to talk to, and it really rekindled, relationships, and it is a beautiful thing to reconnect with old friends. It was wonderful going down to the bar last weekend and seeing a bunch of folks there as well. I didn't learn that much about myself. Although I felt like in some ways it was kind of like being in therapy or co-counseling with my daughter, but I don't think I learned I had to come to grips with just what stupid things I did.
She learned she's a podcaster.
Oh, there you go.
And I have this new career.
That's great.
And how old are you?
So when you said I'm a professional lesbian, I started thinking to myself, I should say, no, I've retired. But I haven't retired, just to be clear, I haven't retired as being a lesbian, but I'm not a professional lesbian anymore. And I am 74.
And we're making season 2 now. So.
On to your next career. But that's always been your way, Karen, right?
Mm-hmm.
You find something you like, you just do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But we just went down to the bar which is now called 123 Pleasant Street, and there were bands that were playing that had played many years ago. And if you haven't listened to our podcast, there's a whole music element. It is about a bar partially. And some of those bands we had never heard live. And so that was a lot of fun to go and really like hear some of these bands that we have heard so much about. And
you didn't see the Chili Peppers though? They weren't there.
No,
they weren't there. But a lot of the bands were the leads in these bands were teenagers at the bar
at the
when
time
Marsha was there, and she was really the person who inspired them and mentored them and encouraged them to go with the music. And now what, 40 years later, 35 years later, they're still playing, and it's
great. That's really great. So Karen, from start to finish, from when Jamie came up with the idea to the end when you were able to release it, how long did it take?
So we started it in December of 2019, and we literally, so it premiered at Tribeca in 20.
Was it 22?
22, yes.
22.
A year.
And we were literally kind of, it was like right up to the wire to, we had a theme song, which I adore, which is Brandy Carlisle.
I do too, yeah. It took me a while to figure out what it was. I was like, oh.
We had not gotten permission from her to use it. So it was like, oh my God, it's in every episode and we really love it. And it was actually Tribeca who helped us. And I don't know whether it was De Niro or who it was that reached out to her to say, hey, can they use this song? And then she said yes. But so it was literally right up until the moment it premiered at Tribeca. So 2 years.
Well, it took us like a year we were doing the interviews. It was like December 2019, and then Wonder Media Network came on board in kind of December of 2020, I think. And then probably 2021, like around April, we really started digging in because it takes time to do contracts and stuff like that, get to know each other. And we had a lot of material. So someone really had to go through all of that material and see what was there. But I'd say like April 2022 to then June 2020 or 2021 to June 20. It took us like then another year to really put together the 8 episodes. It takes a long time to really, and we're seeing that on season 2 now. Like it takes time to really figure out the structure of a season. That is one of the hardest parts. I mean, it's one of the fun parts, but you have all this material and you're like, how does it fit together? And you have hours and hours of material, but you have to find the stories within it and figure out how are you going to keep the audience engaged? And our thing with our series really about on season 1, and I think season 2 is really, how do you find the light and the dark in these stories that have a lot of darkness, but we're not dark and we don't want to be. So we have to, and
find some light somewhere.
Yeah, and they have good people, in both seasons, there's really good people and really smart, interesting people. And also we don't want people to listen to hours and hours of just dark sadness. So that part also is complicated to find the light and the dark in these stories and find the balance within each episode.
So, what do you think took the most time? Like you guys became like investigative reporters because, I remember that they talked a lot about cold calling people and looking through files, and it was almost like you guys were the detectives in the series.
We were junior detectives.
Yeah.
And we are now in season 2 also.
Did that take the most time, do you think? Like just investigating things?
I mean, I think putting the story together took a long time. Doing interviews, sometimes even me, I get impatient and I'm like, I want to finish this. And I don't come from a documentary background, and these are more documentary style. But in the end, there were things that came to us. We have audio that we wouldn't have had if we had rushed it faster. So that's just for me, something I try to work on is like that patience, because they do take a long time and you want to like just be done with them at a certain point.
And I know you were complaining about cold calling people. I don't like to do that either. You cold call people you don't know, and you're like, "Hi."
Also, when you're like cold calling someone that potentially could have committed murder, like
oh yeah, you never know what they're gonna say, right?
But usually they don't answer, so it's okay. But it's the whole thing took like a couple years for sure, and now we're doing season 2, and that's taking, I don't know how long, a year to a year and a half. I mean, it just takes time to get these stories right, and you don't want to get them wrong. There's too many people who are bearing their souls is kind of cliche, but they're telling their stories, and they're sometimes talking about things that they haven't talked about in a long time, or they're telling very difficult experiences, and you really want to do it with respect. And that's our thing, like, is really just trying not to be salacious about it.
Yeah, with this kind of personal content, I can understand, I can understand that.
We don't want to we don't want to fuck it up.
Yeah. And I think there was even and I don't want to give it away either, but there were a few people that you called that you weren't really sure how they were going to react to you. Did they want to tell you the story, or did they not want to tell you the story? And some people didn't want to relive it.
Yeah, and this was a story that happened a long time ago. And one of the things we learned is that memory is a very fungible thing, right? So we would read police reports and they'd say one thing, but then they'd remember it differently now. And it's like, and sometimes it'd feel like people wanted to please us. So how did that impact what they were telling us? And but memory's tricky.
Yeah, it is. So what was one of the biggest challenges that you faced in this project, and how did you overcome it? Who wants to go first?
Learning the process is, when you try something new, there is a learning curve for sure, and I will admit that. I mean, it's it takes time to. While it's similar, it's still different, and I think some of that was, for me, took time.
Jamie was the audio person, and she became absolutely obsessed
with audio,
and whether it was the refrigerator sound, or a mother who just couldn't quite figure out how to turn off various beeping devices, or forget to turn off my phone in the middle of an interview, or it was just like, sometimes I think I was her biggest challenge.
But it was also, the true crime part was challenging, like developing a relationship with the police detective, who was very nice, but that's not a normal relationship we would have. And then, reaching out to people that we hadn't talked to for a long time. I am great on a film set.
She is.
I was a line producer and a production manager and a production supervisor and all of that.
Yeah, she's pretty much done everything.
But the true crime part is hard. You don't want to get it again. You don't want to mess it up. Like, there's a lot of facts and details, and I will say, I think we only had one thing that we changed. Like, I can't even remember what it was, and it wasn't even a major thing. There was like one, maybe two things we changed in the narration after the podcast came out, but I don't even think they were related to the true crime thing. They might have been related to the music, and who played a certain song or something related to the bar. But so I feel like that is a good thing, but it can be nerve-wracking, and a lot of podcasts do have fact checkers. Ours don't really require them in the same way, but you don't want to get facts wrong. That's tough.
Yeah, there were lots of people who were convinced that they knew what happened and who did what, and it was really important for us not to kind of put out all of those rumors or ideas when there was nothing behind it that we could prove. Yeah, he's the one who did it, or no, or there's it would have made it a much more salacious and kind of wild.
You had like that evidence, that showed it.
Right.
Pop up that question again. What was that last question? I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing.
Anxiety. Does it give us anxiety to like
to try to make it?
Yeah, I mean, we feel I'd say responsibility. We feel responsible. We felt responsible, and we do on this next one to get the story right, and I think for us to really treat people with respect, and that's our main thing. Is like people first and foremost, they're human beings who have been through something, and like that we would never want to, I don't know, just treat them poorly. So that takes thinking, like how do you do that when you're telling the story and you become very close to people and you have to find those lines, and it's just that it can be tough. But I don't know, anxiety, it just definitely a little anxiety, and definitely just a sense of responsibility.
Anyone that you spoke to that after they heard the podcast was like, I don't like the way you represented me on the podcast? No. Good, that's great.
But it doesn't mean we don't worry about it.
Yeah.
No, and no. And we were very careful about that, like in the way you describe people, in the description, like there was one case where I was nervous. Like I felt like we used a part of someone's audio that was not the part that maybe they would have liked us to use, but it helped us tell the story and show the dimensions of our main character. And we really looked over and over. I did really looked over and over again at the narration around that audio to make sure that it felt balanced and not so that hopefully that person would not come back and say, and I was worried that they were going to come back.
That would be my biggest worry. I'm like, I hope everyone's happy with how we represented them.
They didn't.
So they said they had a question that was, I'm forgetting what it was. It was here it is. Yeah.
Better with guests. Well, we don't have. First of all, we didn't have guests, right? Because this was it was a serialized story we were telling. It wasn't like an interview format, although we certainly interviewed people to get information. But I think this season we winged it a lot for the first season. And it's not like we sat down and wrote out questions and what do we want to get from this person and we were just kind of like, hey, we want to talk to you about Marcia, or let's, this season and because it's not our story, but we're definitely much more organized, or Jamie is much more organized. And we have producers in the beginning. We did all the interviews with it was just us. Now we've got we're still affiliated with Wonder Media Network, and they're working with us, and so they're producers on all the interviews we do in the background, and they travel with us and they help write questions, and then we refine the questions. So, and then there's still a little bit of winging it. I still like to wing it, but mostly there are questions in a format to follow, and that's very different.
How did you guys come to be with Wonder Media Network? How did they pick up this? And was it your choice to go with them, or were they just really excited about the project?
We did the teaser, and it was somebody that I knew that I had worked with at Focus Features, and who had met someone at Wonder Media Network, and she said to me, "Oh, you should connect with this company because they're a women-owned company. They are interested in women in politics, and they just seem like
I love them. I just love them. Shout out to you guys. Hi, everybody."
And we and that just felt like I at the time was finishing my tenure as the president of the board of New York Women in Film and Television, and had done a lot of work around that. And then we were mother-daughter, and there was a political angle to this. My parents were activists. And so I think they felt like it was a good fit for them, and a good way to tell a sort of serialized story. And we really like them, and they're good people. And we're happy to do another season with them. But it was just kind of it happened very quickly. I do give a lot of credit to that original teaser. And the story, I felt like the story was a good story. I mean, we've been working on it in different iterations for a long time. and we're still working on it and hope to bring it to television. And so I can say that I felt strongly that it was a good story. And if you have a good story, it's easier to sell. Like if you have something that you really feel like, and I've been doing it long enough that I felt like I felt good about it. Like I felt like, this is a good story.
And when you guys did the teaser's got visuals and audio.
No,
right?
it's just audio.
It's the audio. So they just picked it up just from the audio teaser.
Yeah, but it was longer. It was 4 minutes.
Okay.
It told more of the story, and it had a little bit more of us and sort of our exchange in the teaser. So the tone is very similar to what the teaser was, but it was a little more than what you get in the trailer, the shorter trailer, which is about a minute, and it's pretty short, maybe under 2 minutes. But I have not listened to the trailer in a long time, I have to say, and we did not edit that trailer, and we did the narration and we gave notes, but a woman at the company Adesua Agbenile, she cut the trailer, and she did a fantastic job, because I could not figure out how to cut something 2 minutes out of all of the information that we needed to relay. And that was our editor when we were doing the trailer. The teaser, the first longer teaser, she really wanted to get something shorter. And I was like, I can't see it. I can't see something shorter. And we ended up on 4 minutes, which was the right amount for a sales tool, but it was not the right amount of time for a trailer that lives on all of the platforms. And I could not have done that. And the team was able to do that. And when I heard it today, I was like, that's a good teaser. Trailer. That's a trailer. Trailer tease. The teaser
trailer.
What we used to sell, we call the trailer that lives on the platforms, we call that a trailer.
And they are really challenging to do. And they're so challenging to do.
There's so many parts of the story. In our case, it's like our story, my childhood, then it's Marcia and her story and the true crime. And then there's the music, and then there's the mother-daughter element. And there are so many layers to the story. And then there's the time.
Like how do you fit that in? Yeah.
And the place. Then it's the 1970s and 80s. It's West Virginia. So it's all the context around that. So fitting that into a short amount of time is very difficult. It's challenging. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, they must have done a brilliant job for them to have picked you up, like first podcast ever, like, yeah, this is great. Let's do it. That's so cool. So what is the second season going to bring us? Can you tell us anything about it?
The second season will be the same hosts, because I always tell people love my mom in the first season. So it'll be the same host, and it'll have that mother-daughter element, but it is not our story. We've already told our story, although there are other parts of our story that maybe we could tell at another time. But this story is really came to us through, what was the hardest artistic choice we made? Music is very hard. I'm just going to answer quickly. We get a lot of compliments on the music, and we thought we were going to use a composer, and it didn't work out. And in the end, we used mostly library music other than our theme song. And people think it's great. And it took a lot of careful curation and thinking and listening to all the episodes and figuring out, could you reuse to make it kind of sound like score? And in the end, it really worked out. But the music was a challenge. Maybe, I don't know if it was the most challenging thing, but it was challenging. Season 2 came to us.
Wait. So season 2 is one of the things that happened as a result of season 1 is that people started reaching out to us, friends, and in a couple of cases, old friends, saying, "I've got a story I would really."
By the way,
I have a story I'd really like that needs to be told. So this is a story that was brought to us by a friend of mine.
Yes. So a friend of my mom lives part-time in Oaxaca, Mexico. And a friend of my mom's, who's also an expat who lives in Oaxaca, reached out to my mom because her daughter had been pulled into a cult. And they were in a kind of political action group in Oaxaca after Trump won the election, kind of trying to figure out what they could do around this election. And my mom's friend kept kind of telling the group this story about her daughter who ended up in this place that she didn't want to, wasn't a good place. And so she eventually, after season 1 came out, she reached out to my mom and she said, would you help us tell this story? And I know, yes, cults. People are interested in cults, but I think at this point we really feel like this story is a story worth telling. And there are so many cults out there, small and large, and you don't have to have a lot of people to be in a cult. A cult can be 5 people, it can be 2 people. If you can be in a relationship, you can end up in a cult. And really thinking about this idea of like, could this happen to me? And why is it so hard to take down a cult leader through this story of my mom's friend and her daughter? So we kind of have this entry into it through a mother-daughter lens, but it's really become much bigger than just those 2 people.
So then we're gonna.
It's all about the patriarchy.
It's a male Swami, white guy, Hindu cult.
Yeah, there you go, Alexis.
And it's and we kind of have went into it saying like, could never happen to me, and are kind of coming out of it saying like, actually,
how it could happen, right?
It just depends on where you are in your life and what your vulnerabilities are.
Yeah, we all have vulnerable moments, or moments of loneliness, or moments, or family histories, or whatever it is.
And there are people who are very manipulative, like, and sometimes you don't even realize that you're being manipulated. You're being manipulated by them. Like they're very,
There are people
convincing
who have a sense of power, whether it's good or bad, but they do. And there are people who are seeking, who are looking for something, either a parent figure,
not always the Fruit Loops.
Not always. A lot of cult leaders don't just want crazy people. They want lawyers and doctors and people who have money, and they want educated people who can help run systems, who can maintain organizations. So it's and there are people in cults who have need, who are, what's the word?
More vulnerable.
But it's a mixed group for sure. And so we're trying to help break some of these cliches and these generalizations, while at the same time really looking at a specific story, which is a cult story.
Well, and it's also about how the social systems that we think we should be able to go to get help, whether it's cops or mental health systems, or there's the criminal that don't work. They just don't work.
Yeah, but it's been interesting. It's not a topic we ever thought we would wade into, and I think in the beginning we were both not sure, but I think we've been doing interviews now for a while, and I think these stories are interesting, and they're sad. They're hard. They're sad stories. People really get taken advantage of, and they're smart. A lot of these people are really, really smart. It's just can be a tough, whether it's just a tough time, or you're seeking, or for whatever reason you get involved with some, a group, and you don't, as we're saying, nobody joins a cult.
Is this just one cult you guys investigated? Just the one cult?
Yeah, we're just doing one.
Is
And
it in,
we're using it more as a vehicle to explore some of these other issues. So I think the last thing we wanted to do is, there's so many cult podcasts and documentaries out there. I think we both went into it the feeling like that was the last thing we wanted to do, is just tell another story about another abusive narcissist, right? But it is a way into really exploring why it's so hard to stop it, and why people get into them. And because those people are always going to be there. We're not going to see an end to these things, whether it's the Trump of Donald Trump, the cult of Donald Trump, or the cult of the Catholic Church, or the cult of your family unit, right? It's like, where there's narcissists,
there could be a cult.
there will be, cults.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
It is. I'm looking forward to it. Definitely. Do you know when it's going to come out, or not sure yet?
No, I mean, we're just finishing the interviews now, and we have to put it together. So I think the hope would be in the next summer. By the time, I mean, we're already basically in November, and we have to write the scripts, record the narration, edit, and all of that. So we will see, but it's
still a ways to go.
It's a great story, and people always, they can never sadly get enough and of that type of story. And but mostly we just want to tell the human element of that story, because like I said, a lot of the people are just so kind and smart and interesting, and
it almost makes it seem legitimate, when you have educated, smart people that are involved in it,
Well, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And it's not all bad. It's not all bad, right? Some of these places are these wonderful communities with people being supportive and kind to each other, and good food, and but then there's this overshadowing, narcissist that really is damaging to not everybody in it, but to a lot of people.
Yep.
Now, do you guys have already other stories that you're looking forward to jumping into? Like once you're done with this one, or are you just not really?
At this point, we're just telling this story, and we'll see. I'm sure when we finish this one,
the next one will be.
Other people will come to us and tell us, tell us other. We had a couple other stories we were looking at, but this one felt the most doable at the time, and sort of current, and just doable. So we'll see. I think who knows who else my mom knows.
Give these ladies a break.
We'll see what other weird stories.
Like more stories.
We're still hoping I Was Never There will go to TV.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the question I was going to go back to. Yeah.
So we are connected with another company called Archer Gray, who also fabulous company, fabulous women. And we we were talking about it just before the strike, and now we've picked it back up, and having conversations with writers and thinking about, that was always the intention for I Was Never There. Or that was the original intention. I should say that you don't make a podcast. If you think about it just as IP, I think that will I don't know if that helps the quality of the project. I think you really have to just think like this is all it could live as. And I think we really tried to have that mindset, like, just if this is all there is, like, we are proud of this project and we feel good about it. But we always did see it as a television series, because we think the world is so rich, and the time period is often told in a cliched way, and we think we can tell it differently with authenticity. And there's music, and there's magic, and there's marijuana, there's crime, and there's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So
Everything you could ever want.
Limited series or a multi-season show.
And would you guys star in it? Karen, would you star in it? No.
Jennifer Connelly is going to play me. And what's her name?
Jamie Lee Curtis is going to play me.
Jamie Lee Curtis, perfect pick.
No, we don't know. We won't. And there's a lot. Those are, it's like, how do we play into it? Like, do you keep the mother daughter because we're in the current time, or do you go back? There's all these
things. Yeah.
Well, and I keep saying, so when do we start shooting? When's it gonna? And Jamie's like, hey, this is gonna take years, and I'm like, hey, I'm 74 years old. You gotta speed.
We gotta do it now.
Do this.
Mm-hmm. So. Anyway, it's all fun. We enjoy it all.
A lot of things coming up. I love it. This is great. Well, I'm excited to see more. I'm excited to see more from the both of you. And I just wanted to just really thank you for coming on and sharing this wonderful project with us. You guys are great. And listen, we'll probably reach out again to hear from your new projects coming up. Yeah. And, I can't tell you how thankful I am that you guys are here.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so happy. I really enjoyed it, and you guys did great work. I really loved it.
And my mom's in Narrowsburg, and I am sometimes in Kingston.
I know. I kept telling you. I was
part of the Catskills family.
I think me and Jamie are the same age because I think my parents are also Karen's age. So it's like we should hang out. So anyway,
hit the big 5-0.
Yeah.
That's where I am.
Yes, I am. I am there. Exactly. So anyway, that is it with the. I don't know if we're gonna go off, or does Charles? Are you gonna hit us off, Charles, or we go off? I'm not sure if it goes off now.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
It was fun.
And Charles, thank you.
And Charles from behind, and
listen to the podcast.
Listen to the podcast.
I was over there.